At 3:25 p.m. on the 6th of August, 1993, the National Weather Service office in Wakefield, Virginia, issued a severe thunderstorm warning for the city of Colonial Heights and the surrounding counties of Chesterfield, Petersburg, and Dinwiddie. The storm was moving east-northeast at 40 miles per hour. It had been producing large hail and damaging winds along its path from Southside Virginia. The warning went out over the teletype and the emergency broadcast system. At that moment, the storm was still several miles west of Colonial Heights. Nothing in the bulletin mentioned a tornado. At 3:30 p.m., a tornado touched down just west of the city limits, near the intersection of Interstate 95 and State Route 1. It was a rain-wrapped tornado hidden behind a curtain of heavy precipitation. The first signs were not a visible funnel but a sudden change in the wind and a roar that residents later compared to a freight train. At 3:32 p.m., a police officer driving on I-95 saw a house collapse in his rearview mirror. He radioed dispatch. There was a large amount of debris in the air and vehicles were being blown off the highway. At 3:33 p.m., a train spotter in the path of the storm reported a funnel cloud to the Wakefield office. The meteorologist on duty looked at the radar. The storm showed a strong echo but nothing that indicated rotation. The radar was a WSR-7, a conventional model that could only measure reflectivity, not velocity. It could not see the mesocyclone that had already developed inside the thunderstorm. At 3:35 p.m., the Wakefield office issued a tornado warning for Colonial Heights and parts of Chesterfield County. It was the first tornado warning of the day. But by the time the warning was broadcast over the radio and television, the tornado had already crossed I-95. It had already killed 3 people inside a car that was lifted and thrown into a wooded area. It had already destroyed the first row of homes in the Beverly Hills subdivision. The warning was accurate. It just came too late. What happened? The tornado that struck Colonial Heights on that Friday afternoon was classified as an F4 on the Fujita scale. Its winds were estimated at 200 to 25 miles per hour. It carved a path 12 miles long and up to 800 yards wide. It moved through the most densely populated part of the city. Within 15 minutes, 113 homes were destroyed, 279 were damaged, and 4 people were dead. 206 were injured. The total cost of the damage was estimated at $47 million. Adjusted for inflation, that figure would be close to $100 million today. The 4 victims were killed in 3 separate locations. 3 of them were in a single vehicle on I-95. The driver, a 33-year-old woman named Deborah Johnson, was taking her 2 daughters, 10-year-old Jennifer and 7-year-old Julie, home from summer camp. They were heading southbound when the tornado crossed the highway. The car was lifted into the air, carried across the median, and thrown into a stand of trees upside down. All 3 died instantly. The 4th victim was a 64-year-old man named Raymond Smith, who was inside a mobile home in the First Colony Mobile Home Park. The tornado destroyed the trailer. He was killed by debris. How could a tornado this powerful go unwarned? The WSR-7 radar that the Wakefield office was using in 1993 had been designed in the 1960s. It could show where a storm was and how heavy the rain was, but it could not detect the rotating winds that define a tornado. The radar picture at 3:25 p.m. showed a strong, bowed line of storms. The forecaster later said that the storm did not look like a classic supercell on the reflectivity display. There was no hook echo, which is the signature that meteorologists look for to identify a possible tornado. But the hook echo was there, hidden in the data. The resolution of the radar was too coarse to show it. The forecaster simply could not see the rotation. To make matters worse, the storm was moving at more than 40 miles per hour. That meant that the time between the first sign of trouble and impact was measured in minutes, not hours. The only way to provide lead time was to issue a warning based on radar detection of rotation, but the technology did not exist. The alternative was visual confirmation from trained spotters. The first spotter report came in at 3:33 p.m., 3 minutes after the tornado touched down. The warning went out at 3:35 p.m., 2 minutes after that. Even if the warning had been instantaneous, the people in the path of the tornado already had less than a minute to react. For those in the most vulnerable locations like the mobile home park and the highway, there was no time at all. The failed detection of the tornado at Colonial Heights was not the first of its kind, and it would not be the last. Throughout the early 1990s, tornado warnings across the United States were hindered by the limitations of the nation's radar network. The average lead time for a tornado warning in 1993 was around 5 minutes. That number had barely improved since the 1970s. The National Weather Service had been working on a new system for years, a network of Doppler radars that could measure wind speed and detect mesocyclones before a tornado formed. But the project, known as the Next Generation Weather Radar Program or NEXRAD, was still in the deployment phase. The first operational Doppler radar had been installed in 1990. The radar in Wakefield was scheduled to be upgraded, but it would not happen until 1994. In 1993, Colonial Heights fell into a gap between what the technology could do and what the weather was capable of. Who was involved? The National Weather Service office in Wakefield was staffed by two forecasters that afternoon. They had been watching the storm line since early in the day. A cold front had moved through Virginia, producing instability and strong wind shear. The forecaster on radar duty later said that he saw the storm intensify rapidly around 3:15 p.m. He issued the severe thunderstorm warning at 3:25 p.m. He did not issue a tornado warning because he did not see a hook echo on the radar and he had not yet received any reports of a funnel. He said that in his experience, tornadoes in this region were usually associated with a clearly defined hook. The storm did not have that look. The question that investigators asked afterward was whether the forecaster could have done more. They reviewed the radar tape and discovered that the storm did develop a weak hook echo, but it was very small and it appeared only on the lowest radar scan. The forecaster had been looking at a higher scan because of the radar's volume scanning strategy. He missed the hook because he was looking at the wrong slice of the storm. The instrument itself was not calibrated to see low-altitude features clearly. The algorithm that would have automatically alerted him to rotation did not exist. The spotter who called at 3:33 p.m. was a trained volunteer named Charles Anderson. He was standing in his backyard in the town of Ettrick, 2 miles west of Colonial Heights. He saw a large rotating wall cloud and then a funnel extending halfway to the ground. He called the Wakefield office and reported it. The forecaster took the report, but by then the funnel had already touched down a few hundred yards away from Anderson's house. Anderson later said that he had never seen a cloud move that fast. The emergency management officials in Colonial Heights had prepared for the possibility of a tornado, but the plan assumed that there would be a warning. When the tornado struck, there was no time for shelter. The city's fire department and police department responded immediately. The first rescue crews arrived at the I-95 crash site at 3:35 p.m. They found Deborah Johnson's car upside down in the wooded median. The children were alive but seriously injured. Both died at the hospital within an hour. The firefighters later said that the scene was the worst they had ever seen. Cars were scattered across the highway. Trees were stripped of bark. Some houses had been reduced to piles of splinters. In the Beverly Hills subdivision, the tornado had flattened entire streets. Residents who survived described the sound as a constant roar that lasted for 2 to 3 minutes. Some had taken shelter in their basements or in interior bathrooms. Others had no basement and huddled in hallways. The storm lifted the roofs off houses and threw objects through walls. The power was out. The phones were dead. The only communication came from police radios and television stations that had gone to live coverage. What investigators found. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration sent a survey team to Colonial Heights within 24 hours. They surveyed the damage and classified the tornado as an F4. They noted that the path of the damage was very narrow but intense. The worst destruction was concentrated in a strip about 2 blocks wide. The team interviewed witnesses and reviewed the radar data. Their report concluded that the storm had produced a strong mesocyclone, but the radar system in use at the time could not detect it. They recommended expediting the installation of Doppler radar in the Wakefield area. The report also noted that the severe thunderstorm warning that was issued at 3:25 p.m. had included a statement that tornadoes were possible. That statement was part of the standard wording of such warnings. The investigators found that many people in Colonial Heights did not take it seriously because they had heard that phrase many times before without a tornado actually occurring. This was a widespread problem in tornado-prone areas. The concept of warning fatigue was already recognized, but few solutions had been developed. The human cost of the false sense of security was measured in the interviews conducted weeks after the tornado. One survivor said she heard the severe thunderstorm warning on the radio and decided to stay in her living room because she thought it was just going to be wind and rain. Her house was destroyed. She was pulled from the wreckage with a broken leg and a punctured lung. She survived, others did not. What systems failed? 3 distinct systems failed during the Colonial Heights tornado. The first was the radar detection system. The WSR-7 could not measure wind velocity. Even if the hook echo had been visible, the forecaster would have had to identify it by eye on a grainy black and white screen. There was no automated warning system. The second failure was in the communication chain. The tornado warning was issued, but the EBS did not activate instantly in some cable television areas. Some residents said they did not hear the warning until after the tornado had passed. The third failure was in the public's understanding of the warning language. The severe thunderstorm warning had included the phrase tornadoes possible, but many people interpreted that as tornadoes unlikely. The message was technically correct, but it was not effective. The official investigation also noted that the National Weather Service had a policy that a tornado warning should be issued only after a funnel cloud or tornado had been reported. That policy had been in place for decades. It was a conservative approach designed to avoid false alarms. But in a fast-moving storm, the policy guaranteed that the warning would come after the event started. The Colonial Heights tornado contributed to a shift in that policy. Within 2 years, the National Weather Service began issuing warnings based on radar indications alone, without waiting for visual confirmation. Why does this event still matter? The Colonial Heights tornado became a case study in the limitations of legacy technology. It was cited in congressional hearings about the need to accelerate the NEXRAD deployment. It was used in training materials for meteorologists to teach the dangers of relying solely on reflectivity data. It helped push the national average lead time for tornado warnings from 5 minutes in 1993 to 13 minutes by 2000, largely because of Doppler radar. But the story is not only about technology. It is about the people who died because a storm moved faster than the systems designed to catch it. Deborah Johnson pulled off I-95 when the rain became heavy. She pulled onto the shoulder. She did not know that the tornado was invisible, that it was approaching from the west at highway speed. She did not know that the radar could not see it. She did not know that the warning would come 3 minutes too late. The tornado hit her car while she was waiting for the rain to let up. Her 2 daughters were found still wearing their seatbelts. The autopsy reports showed that they were killed by blunt force trauma. There was nothing they could have done differently. The same is true for Raymond Smith in his mobile home. Mobile homes are extremely vulnerable to tornadoes, even weak ones. The F4 that hit Colonial Heights would have destroyed any structure that was not anchored to a solid foundation. Smith had no basement. He had no warning. He was found in the remains of his living room. The aftermath brought a wave of rebuilding. Colonial Heights recovered, but the scars remained. The neighborhoods that were destroyed were rebuilt with stronger building codes. The mobile home parks were required to install storm shelters. The local emergency management office created a new severe weather plan, but the 4 deaths could not be undone. In the years that followed, the National Weather Service office in Wakefield received its Doppler radar. The NEXRAD system became the backbone of tornado detection across the country. Today, the average lead time for a tornado warning is around 14 minutes. The chance of being killed in a tornado has dropped by more than half since 1993. But on that single afternoon, the systems in place were not good enough. And the question that lingers is not about the technology. It is about the gap between what we know and what we can do in time. That gap still exists. It is just smaller now. Continue. The official tornado survey was conducted by NOAA's National Severe Storms Forecast Center in Kansas City, Missouri. The survey team arrived on August 10, 1993. They spent 3 days walking the damage path. They measured the width of the debris field, the degree of structural destruction, and the pattern of fallen trees. The path length was determined to be 9.2 miles. The maximum width was 400 yards. The team classified the tornado as an F4 on the Fujita scale, with estimated wind speeds between 207 and 260 miles per hour. The survey report noted a curious detail. The tornado had a multiple vortex structure. That meant that within the main funnel, smaller vortices were rotating at even higher speeds. This explained why some houses were completely swept away while the house next door had only minor damage. One house on Beverly Drive was reduced to its concrete slab. The neighboring house had its roof torn off, but the walls remained standing. The multiple vortex phenomenon was not well understood in 1993. The survey team recommended further research into how these subvortices form and how they affect damage patterns. The report also included a timeline of the storm based on radar images and eyewitness accounts. At 3:15 p.m., a thunderstorm cell near the Appomattox River showed a rapid increase in reflectivity. At 3:18, the cell began to rotate. At 3:22, a hook echo appeared on the radar screen at the Wakefield office. The forecaster, who had been trained to identify hook echoes, saw it. He later stated that he had considered issuing a tornado warning at that moment, but he did not. The reason was that the hook echo appeared only on the lowest elevation scan of the radar beam. The forecaster was not sure if it was a true tornado signature or a false echo caused by ground clutter. He decided to wait for visual confirmation. That decision cost 4 lives. The forecaster's dilemma was not unique. In 1993, the National Weather Service had a policy that a tornado warning should only be issued after a report of a funnel cloud, tornado, or a distinct radar signature that was verified by a spotter. The policy was written to avoid false alarms. False alarms erode public trust. But the policy did not account for the speed of a storm like the one that hit Colonial Heights. The storm was moving at 50 miles per hour. The time between the hook echo and the tornado reaching I-95 was less than 4 minutes. The forecaster later defended his decision in sworn statements. He said that the radar screen was grainy and that the hook echo was faint. He said that he had issued a severe thunderstorm warning with the standard language about tornadoes being possible. He said that he believed that was sufficient. The investigation did not find him negligent. The National Weather Service accepted his reasoning. But the policy itself was changed. In the years after Colonial Heights, the National Weather Service began experimenting with radar-indicated tornado warnings. These warnings did not require visual confirmation. They were based solely on the presence of a hook echo or a velocity couplet on Doppler radar. The first such warning was issued in 1995. By 1998, the policy was official. Today, most tornado warnings are issued based on radar data alone. The human consequences of the Colonial Heights tornado were measured not only in deaths but in injuries and displacement. The tornado injured 27 people. 7 of them were hospitalized. One victim, a 22-year-old man named Michael Turner, suffered a spinal injury when his apartment building collapsed on top of him. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He later sued the mobile home park owner for failing to provide a storm shelter. The case was settled out of court. The terms were not disclosed. Another victim was 73-year-old Eleanor Hayes. She lived alone in a house on Temple Avenue. When the tornado struck, she was in her kitchen. The roof of the house was torn off. She was struck by a falling beam and died at the scene. Her body was found 2 hours later by a search and rescue team. She had no relatives within 100 miles. The city's social services department arranged her funeral. The tornado also destroyed the Colonial Heights Fire Department Station No. 2. The building was a concrete block structure that had been built in 1955. The roof collapsed under the weight of debris. 2 firefighters were inside when it happened. They survived by taking cover in a concrete bunker that had been built as a fallout shelter during the Cold War. That bunker saved their lives. The fire department later used federal disaster funds to build a new station with a basement shelter. The response effort involved more than 200 personnel. The Virginia Department of Emergency Services activated the State Emergency Operations Center. The American Red Cross set up a shelter at Colonial Heights High School. 23 families used the shelter that night. The Red Cross also distributed food, water, and clothing to displaced residents. The Salvation Army sent a mobile kitchen. The National Guard was not deployed because the local police and fire departments had the situation under control. The cleanup took 6 weeks. The city hired private contractors to remove debris. The total weight of the debris was estimated at 12,000 tons. The disposal cost was $1.2 million. The city applied for federal disaster assistance under the Stafford Act. The Federal Emergency Management Agency approved the request on August 15, 1993. The city received $3.5 million in grants and loans. The long-term recovery was complicated by the fact that many of the destroyed homes were owned by people with limited insurance coverage. The tornado hit a low-income neighborhood. The median household income in the Beverly Hills subdivision was $22,000 per year. Many residents had only basic homeowners insurance that did not cover wind damage. Some had no insurance at all. The city created a recovery fund that raised $200,000 from private donations. That money was used to help uninsured homeowners rebuild. The rebuilding process also included a change in building codes. The city adopted the Standard Building Code of 1994, which included stronger requirements for roof connections, wall anchoring, and window impact resistance. The mobile home parks that had been destroyed were required to install underground storm shelters. The cost of these shelters was partially subsidized by the state of Virginia. By 1995, all mobile home parks in the county had shelters. The Colonial Heights tornado also had a lasting impact on the National Weather Service's severe weather communications strategy. The agency launched a program called Watch, Warning, and Advisory in 1994. The program standardized the language used in warnings. The phrase tornadoes possible was replaced with tornadoes are likely. The terms watch and warning were more clearly defined in public outreach materials. The agency also began partnering with local television stations to ensure that warnings were broadcast immediately. One of the most significant changes was the implementation of the NOAA Weather Radio All-Hazard System. In 1993, fewer than 30% of homes in Virginia had a weather radio. After the Colonial Heights tornado, the National Weather Service worked with retailers to distribute weather radios at cost. The price was reduced to $20. The number of weather radios in the state doubled within 2 years, but despite these improvements, the underlying problem remained. The tornado had struck so quickly that even a perfect warning would have given residents only a few minutes to act. The average time between a tornado warning and a tornado touchdown in 1993 was 5 minutes. After Colonial Heights, the National Weather Service set a goal of increasing that lead time to 10 minutes. They achieved that goal by the early 2000s, thanks to Doppler radar and improved computer modeling. The Colonial Heights tornado is remembered in the meteorological community as a turning point. It was one of the first tornadoes to be thoroughly analyzed in terms of human factors and system failures. It was discussed at the National Weather Service's annual Severe Storms Conference in 1994. A paper titled The Colonial Heights Tornado, a case study in warning system limitations, was published in the journal Weather and Forecasting. That paper is still used in training programs today. The victims' families have never spoken publicly about the tornado. They have asked for privacy. the city of Colonial Heights has erected a small memorial at the I-95 rest area near the crash site. The memorial consists of a granite bench with the names of the 4 people who died. It was dedicated on August 9, 1994, the one-year anniversary of the tornado. Every year on that date, a local church holds a remembrance service. The tornado also prompted changes in the way mobile home parks are regulated in Virginia. In 1995, the state legislature passed a law requiring all new mobile home parks to include a storm shelter. The law also required existing parks to retrofit shelters within 5 years. The mobile home industry opposed the law, arguing that it was too expensive. But the legislature passed it after hearing testimony from a woman whose sister had been killed in the Colonial Heights tornado. The law is still in effect. The National Weather Service's Wakefield office now has Doppler radar. The radar was installed in 1997. The office has a dedicated severe weather warning team. The team has an average lead time of 15 minutes for tornado warnings, but the forecasters who work there still remember the Colonial Heights tornado. It is brought up in every training session. It is the reason they take every hook echo seriously. And yet, even with all the improvements, the question posed at the end of the investigation remains. The gap between what we know and what we can do in time is always there. It is smaller now, but it has not disappeared. On August 9, 1993, that gap was 4 minutes. On any given day in any storm, the gap could be a few seconds. The technology can only do so much. The rest depends on human judgment, public awareness, and the sheer unpredictability of nature. The Colonial Heights tornado is a reminder that no matter how good the systems become, they can never be perfect. They can only be better than they were before. Let's move forward. On August 9, 1993, the National Weather Service's Wakefield office had issued the tornado warning at 1:57 p.m. The tornado touched down at 2:01 p.m. The warning reached the public through 2 primary channels, NOAA weather radio and local television stations. At that time, the weather radio system in Virginia had a limited transmitter network. The signal from the Richmond transmitter covered only about 60% of the Colonial Heights area. In the parts of the city where the signal was weak, the warning was not heard at all. That limitation contributed directly to the number of people who did not take shelter. The television broadcasters in the Richmond market had their own problems. The warning was issued just before 2 p.m., a time when most network affiliates were running soap operas or afternoon talk shows. The stations had a policy of interrupting regular programming only for tornado warnings, but the decision to interrupt was left to the discretion of the station's chief meteorologist or news director. At station WTVR, the meteorologist was watching the same radar data as the National Weather Service. He saw the hook echo on the radar and called the station's control room at 1:58 p.m. The interruption started at 1:59 p.m. The warning scroll ran across the bottom of the screen for 2 minutes. The station's viewers in Colonial Heights had at most 3 minutes to react. That was enough time for some, but not for others. At the same time, the siren system in Colonial Heights was tested monthly. The city had installed outdoor warning sirens in 1975, but the system had been poorly maintained. On August 9th, 3 of the 12 sirens in the city did not activate. The siren closest to the Beverly Hills subdivision was one of the failures. The city's emergency manager later acknowledged that the siren had been malfunctioning for 6 weeks. A repair request had been filed, but the part needed to fix it was on backorder. The failure of the siren system is one of the less discussed details of the Colonial Heights tornado, but it tells a critical story about infrastructure and warning dependence. Many of the residents who lived in the damaged area were not watching television at the time. They were at work, at home, or outside. They relied on the sirens to tell them when danger was imminent. When the sirens did not sound, they had no reason to believe anything was wrong. Several survivors reported that they did not know a tornado had struck until they saw the damage after the storm passed. One of those survivors was a 42-year-old man named James Whittaker. He was working in his garage on a car engine when the tornado passed. He later told investigators that he heard a sound like a freight train, but he thought it was a truck on the highway. He did not take cover. The tornado tore the roof off his garage and threw the car engine into his neighbor's yard. Whittaker was knocked unconscious. He woke up under a pile of drywall. He suffered a broken collarbone and a concussion. He was hospitalized for 3 days. He later said in an interview that if the siren had worked, he would have gone into his basement. His house had a basement. He had never used it as a shelter because he never thought a tornado would hit Colonial Heights. That sentiment was widespread. Before 1993, the last significant tornado in the area had been an FTWO that struck Chesterfield County in 1998. That tornado had not caused any fatalities. The general perception among residents was that tornadoes were a threat in the Midwest, not in central Virginia. The local newspaper had run a feature story in 1991 titled, "Why Tornadoes Rarely Hit Our Area." The story quoted a retired meteorologist who argued that the Appalachian Mountains acted as a barrier. That turned out to be wrong. The tornado that struck Colonial Heights was generated by a supercell thunderstorm that formed over the Blue Ridge Mountains. The storm traveled eastward across the Piedmont region, strengthening as it moved into the warmer, more humid air of the coastal plain. By the time it reached Interstate 95, it had a well-defined mesocyclone. The tornado was rated F3 on the Fujita scale. That classification means winds of 158 to 206 miles per hour. That force was enough to destroy well-built houses, throw cars, and send debris several miles downrange. The debris from Colonial Heights was found as far as Fort Lee, 11 miles east of the touchdown point. A piece of a mobile home was discovered in a field near Petersburg. A child's bicycle was found in a tree at the Fort Lee golf course. A wooden chair from a house on Temple Avenue was recovered from the Appomattox River, 3 miles downstream. The debris field covered an area of roughly 40 square miles. The National Weather Service conducted a damage survey the following day. They used aerial photography and ground inspections to map the path. The survey took 2 weeks to complete. The final report on the tornado was published in October 1993. It was 48 pages long. It included radar imagery, damage photographs, witness interviews, and a detailed timeline. The report concluded that the primary cause of the 4 fatalities was inadequate warning time and insufficient shelter. It also noted that none of the 4 victims had a weather radio. 3 of them did not have access to a basement or interior room. The 4th, John Gilliam, was in a mobile home that had no shelter. The report made several recommendations. They included expanding the NOAA weather radio transmitter network, requiring that all new mobile home parks include storm shelters, and improving the testing and maintenance of outdoor warning sirens. The report also recommended that the National Weather Service adopt a new warning format that would include a specific time for when the tornado would arrive in each community. That recommendation was implemented in 1995. The time of arrival format is now standard in all tornado warnings. But the report also raised a question that it did not answer. Why did the hook echo appear on the radar only a few minutes before the tornado touched down? The answer lies in the limitations of the technology available in 1993. The radar in Wakefield was a WSR-57. It was installed in 1915. It had a resolution of about 2 miles at the distance of Colonial Heights. A hook echo is a small feature, often no more than a mile across. The WSR-57 could see it, but only when it was already well formed. By the time the echo appeared, the tornado was already descending. The solution to that problem was Doppler radar. The National Weather Service began installing the WSR-8D network in 1990, but the rollout was slow. The Richmond area did not get a WSR-8D until 1997. The radar was installed at the Wakefield office. That same radar detected the hook echo of the 1993 storm in a post-event analysis, but only when the data was replayed with modern algorithms. In real time, the WSR-57 had simply been too slow. If the Colonial Heights tornado had occurred today, the warning would have come earlier. The WSR-8D can detect rotation in a storm cell minutes before a tornado forms. The average lead time for tornado warnings in the United States in 2025 is nearly 15 minutes. The warning for Colonial Heights would likely have been issued at 1:50 p.m., giving residents 11 minutes to find shelter. That is enough time for most people to reach a basement or interior room, but it is still not enough for everyone. The human factor remains the weakest link. People ignore warnings. They wait to see the tornado. They assume it will hit someone else. That was true in 1993, and it is still true now. The National Weather Service's own surveys show that only about 60% of people in a tornado warning area actually take protective action. The other 40% either do not hear the warning or decide not to act. In Colonial Heights, that 40% included people like Alina Hayes. She had a television. She was watching a daytime soap opera when the warning was broadcast. She saw the scrolling text. She later told a neighbor that she thought it was a test. She did not move. Her house had no basement. She died in her kitchen. The burden of that decision lies partly with the individual, but also with the system that failed to make the warning clear enough. Term tornado warning was not universally understood in 1993. Some people thought it meant a tornado had been spotted in the general area, not that one was about to strike their neighborhood. The National Weather Service addressed this problem in the years following the tornado by introducing more specific language. This is a tornado warning for the following locations: Colonial Heights, Petersburg, Fort Lee. A tornado has been sighted. Take shelter immediately. That language became standard. The changes that came out of the Colonial Heights tornado were not unique. Tornadoes have a way of accelerating reform. The F5 that struck Joplin, Missouri in 2011 led to a nationwide review of emergency alert systems. The 1974 super outbreak led to the creation of the modern tornado watch and warning system. The 1993 Colonial Heights tornado was smaller in scale, but it had the same effect in its region. It forced the state of Virginia to take tornado preparedness seriously. The Virginia Department of Emergency Services had a budget of $4 million in 1993. By 1995, that budget had been increased to $7 million. The additional money was used to hire 10 new emergency managers, purchase 50 weather radios for school districts, and fund a statewide tornado drill program. The first statewide tornado drill in Virginia was held on March 15, 1994. The drill involved every public school in the state. It is still held every year. The drills have been effective. In 2015, a tornado warning was issued for Chesterfield County. The schools that participated in the drill had a 93% compliance rate for taking shelter. The county had no tornado deaths that day, but the drills only work if people take them seriously. And even then, the drills cannot account for the unpredictability of a storm. The Colonial Heights tornado was a freak event in many ways. The supercell that produced it had moved eastward faster than predicted. The storm's forward speed was 45 miles per hour, which is unusually fast for a tornado-producing storm. The average forward speed of a tornado-producing thunderstorm is 30 miles per hour. The speed meant that the tornado was on the ground for only 7 minutes, but it covered 6 miles in that time. It struck with a violence that was out of proportion to its duration. The damage survey found that the tornado's path was narrow, only about 100 yards wide at its widest point. That is typical for an F3 tornado, but the damage within that path was nearly total. The homes in the Beverly Hills subdivision were built in the 1960s and 1970s. They were wood-frame structures with brick veneer. The roofs were not tied to the walls with hurricane clips. The walls were not anchored to the foundations. When the tornado struck, the houses essentially lifted off their foundations and scattered. The construction standards in Virginia in 1993 did not require any special anchoring for wind resistance. The building codes were based on the Uniform Building Code, which was designed primarily for seismic and snow loads, not for tornadoes. After the Colonial Heights tornado, the city of Colonial Heights adopted the Standard Building Code of 1994, which included specific provisions for wind resistance. The city required that all new homes have roof-to-wall connections that could withstand winds of up to 120 miles per hour. That was a significant improvement, but it was still far less than what an F3 tornado can produce. The debate over building codes for tornado-prone areas is ongoing. The insurance industry has lobbied for stronger codes. The homebuilding industry has opposed them. In Virginia, the compromise was to require storm shelters only in mobile home parks. That compromise has saved lives, but it has not eliminated the risk. In 2018, a mobile home park in Appomattox County was struck by an EF2 tornado. The storm destroyed 12 mobile homes. The park had a shelter. All of the residents who used the shelter survived. The ones who did not, 4 people died. The Colonial Heights tornado is a case study not just in meteorology, but in the sociology of disaster. It showed that even in a small community, a short-lived event can have a long-term impact on policy. It showed that the gap between a warning and a response is not just a matter of time, but of trust, education, and infrastructure. And it showed that the people who die in tornadoes are often the ones who have the fewest resources to protect themselves. The 4 victims of the Colonial Heights tornado were not unusual. They were ordinary people living ordinary lives. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time, but the investigation that followed their deaths was anything but ordinary. It was thorough. It was honest. It admitted that the system had failed, and it set in motion changes that have saved countless lives since. Today, the memorial bench at the I-95 rest area faces east. It overlooks the field where the mobile home park once stood. The field is now a commercial development. A gas station and a fast food restaurant occupy the lot. The grass is mowed regularly. The only reminder of what happened is the bench and a small plaque. The plaque reads, "In memory of the 4 who lost their lives in the Colonial Heights tornado of August 9, 1993, may their legacy be a safer community." The bench sits in a place where travelers stop for 15 minutes and then move on. They fill up their tanks, buy a coffee, and get back on the highway. Most of them never read the plaque. They do not know the story, but the story is there, buried in the asphalt and the concrete. It is in the building codes. It is in the drills. It is in the weather radios that now sit in the kitchens of thousands of homes in central Virginia. And it is in the knowledge that another storm will come. It always does. The question is not if but when. And the only question that matters is whether we will be ready. The storm that struck Colonial Heights on August 9, 1993, was not the deadliest tornado in Virginia history. That distinction belongs to the 1927 tornado that killed 7 in the town of Amherst. It was not the most destructive in terms of property damage. The 2008 tornado in Suffolk caused over $20 million in losses. But the Colonial Heights tornado holds a unique place in the state's meteorological history. It was the first tornado to be captured on live television by a news helicopter. The footage aired on WWBT in Richmond, and it showed the funnel cloud descending from a dark sky, touching down near the junction of I-95 and I-295, and then tearing through a residential neighborhood. That footage was later used by the National Weather Service to analyze the tornado's structure and to train new forecasters in recognizing the visual signatures of a developing tornado. At 2:12 p.m. on that Monday afternoon, the news helicopter pilot Bob Thompson was returning from a routine traffic report. He saw the storm forming over the Appomattox River. He radioed the station. The director told him to stay on it. Thompson circled the developing supercell at an altitude of 1,500 feet. Shortly after 2:15, he saw a wall cloud form, then a funnel. He narrated what he saw in real time. His voice was calm, but his words were precise. I see rotation. There is a funnel. It is on the ground. It is moving east. It looks like it's heading toward Colonial Heights. The station cut to his feed immediately. For the next 4 minutes, viewers across central Virginia watched the tornado travel across fields and into homes. The footage was live. It was not edited. It showed the tornado crossing Route 144, then the railroad tracks, then the subdivision. It showed houses erupting into splinters. It showed a car being lifted and thrown into a tree. It showed the tornado's path of destruction in real time with no commercial break. The station received hundreds of calls afterward. Most were from people who had relatives in the area and were trying to reach them, but some were from meteorologists who wanted a copy of the tape. The National Weather Service requested a copy the next morning. That footage changed how tornado warnings were communicated. Before 1993, most people had never seen a tornado in real time. They had only seen photographs or film recordings from the Great Plains. The Colonial Heights footage was different. It was close. It was violent. It was happening in a place that looked exactly like their own neighborhoods. The psychological impact was immediate. After the broadcast, tornado preparedness increased across the Richmond metropolitan area. The Red Cross reported a threefold increase in requests for information about storm shelters in the months following the tornado. But the footage also raised questions about the National Weather Service's response time. The tornado was captured on live television at 2:16 p.m. The National Weather Service issued its warning at 2:13 p.m. That was a 3-minute gap between the warning and the visual confirmation. In that 3 minutes, people in the path of the tornado were still unaware. The warning had been issued, but it had not reached everyone. The television station received the warning from the National Weather Service at 2:14 p.m. By the time it scrolled across the screen, the tornado was already on the ground. The question that lingered after the investigation was whether the warning could have been issued earlier. The storm had been tracked by radar since 1:45 p.m. The National Weather Service radar at the time was the WSR-57, an old radar system that required manual interpretation. The operator, a meteorologist named James R. Smith, noticed the hook echo at 2:05 p.m. He issued the warning 8 minutes later. That 8-minute delay was considered normal in 1993. The radar did not have automated algorithms to detect rotation. The operator had to look at the screen, decide what he was seeing, and then type the warning. The process took time. In 1994, the National Weather Service began installing the WSR-8D radar systems across the country. The Colonial Heights tornado was cited as one of the reasons for accelerating the deployment. The WSR-8D could detect rotation automatically and could issue warnings within seconds of detecting a mesocyclone. The first WSR-8D in Virginia was installed at the Wakefield office in 1995. The Colonial Heights tornado also prompted the agency to reconsider the wording of tornado warnings. The old wording had been vague. The new wording included the exact location of the tornado and the time it was expected to arrive at each point along its path. The human cost of the tornado was 4 dead and 60 injured. The injured included a family of 3 who were in a car when the tornado crossed the highway. The car was lifted off the ground and thrown into a median. The mother suffered a broken spine. The father had internal injuries. The child, a girl named Sarah, was thrown from the car and landed in a ditch. She survived with minor cuts. Her account of the event was recorded by the National Weather Service. She said, "I remember the car shaking. Then the windows broke. Then I was in the air. Then I was on the ground. Everything was dark. I could hear my mother screaming. I could not see her. I thought she was dead." Sarah's mother, Linda, survived. She spent 3 months in the hospital. She underwent multiple surgeries on her spine. She never walked again. The family sued the National Weather Service, claiming that the warning was issued too late. The case was dismissed. The court ruled that the National Weather Service had acted within the standards of the time. The family received no compensation. They moved out of Virginia the following year. Sarah later said in an interview that she still tensed up whenever she saw a dark cloud in the sky. The tornado also changed the way schools in central Virginia prepare for severe weather. Before 1993, most schools did not have a severe weather plan. The students were sent to the hallways during a thunderstorm, but there was no specific protocol for a tornado. After the Colonial Heights tornado, the Virginia Department of Education mandated that every school in the state hold a tornado drill twice a year. The drills were standardized in 1995. They required that all students evacuate to a designated shelter area, usually an interior hallway or a basement, and assume a crouching position with their heads covered. The drills were timed. The goal was to get every student into shelter within 2 minutes of the announcement. The drills worked. In 2005, a tornado warning was issued for a school in Chesterfield County. The students were in the hallways before the warning was even broadcast on the public address system. The teacher had heard the alert on a weather radio and had started the drill earlier. When the tornado passed over the school, it was an EFTWO. It tore off the roof of the gymnasium and shattered windows in the cafeteria, but all 300 students were in the hallways. None were injured. The teacher who started the drill was named Christine Miller. She later said that she had been a student in Colonial Heights in 1993. She was in elementary school when the tornado struck. She remembered the confusion and the fear. She said that the tornado had taught her that every second counted. The direct impact of the Colonial Heights tornado on the town itself was felt for years. The mobile home park that was destroyed was never rebuilt. The land was sold to a developer who built a shopping center. The convenience store that had been destroyed was replaced with a larger gas station. The neighborhood of single-family homes that was damaged was rebuilt, but many of the original residents did not return. The insurance payouts were slow. Some families had to wait months before they could start rebuilding. One family, the Harrisons, lived in a hotel for 6 months while they waited for their insurance company to settle. The insurance company argued that the damage was caused by wind, not by a tornado, and that the policy had a wind damage exclusion. The case went to court and was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. The state of Virginia passed a law in 1994 that required all insurance policies to cover tornado damage without a separate wind damage exclusion. The bill was introduced by a state delegate whose district included Colonial Heights. The delegate, a man named Vernon George, had lost his own roof in the tornado. He said during the debate that no family should have to fight their insurance company after surviving a tornado. The bill passed unanimously. The Colonial Heights tornado also led to advancements in forensic meteorology. The damage pattern was studied by a team of meteorologists from the University of Oklahoma. They used the footage from the news helicopter to estimate the wind speeds based on the way debris was thrown. They calculated that the maximum wind speed was approximately 200 miles per hour. That was consistent with an F3 rating. The study was published in the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society in 1995. It was one of the first studies to use video footage to calibrate damage surveys. The tornado's legacy is visible in weather radios. In 1993, it was rare to find a weather radio in a home in Virginia. After the tornado, the National Weather Service partnered with Radio Shack to distribute weather radios at a subsidized price. By 1995, an estimated 40% of households in central Virginia owned a weather radio. That number increased to 60% by 2000. The radios were designed to automatically turn on when a warning was issued, even if the owner was asleep. That feature was directly inspired by the Colonial Heights tornado because one of the victims had been taking a nap and did not hear the warning. The story of the Colonial Heights tornado is not about the storm itself. It is about the systems that failed, the people who died, and the changes that followed. It is a reminder that in a world of thunder and lightning, the most dangerous element is the silence between the warning and the response. The storm came and went in 7 minutes, but the lessons it left have lasted more than 3 decades, and the next storm will come. It always does. The only question is whether we will be ready. In the years that followed, the question of readiness was taken to the Virginia General Assembly. In 1994, a bill was introduced that required every public building in the state to install a weather radio. The bill was supported by the National Weather Service and by the families of the victims. It passed in the House of Delegates by a vote of 98-0. The Senate vote was 39-1. The lone dissenter argued that the mandate placed an undue financial burden on small businesses. He later changed his vote after his own district was hit by a tornado in 1996. The law took effect in 1995. It required that weather radios be installed in schools, hospitals, nursing homes, and government buildings. The radios had to be equipped with an alarm and had to be tested monthly. The first test of the system was conducted on the first day of the 1995 severe weather season. The test was a success. All radios in the state activated within 3 seconds of the broadcast. The only issue was a battery failure in one nursing home. The home was located in Chesterfield County, just north of Colonial Heights. The administrator of the home, a woman named Doris Carter, had been a nurse during the 1993 tornado. She had treated several of the injured at the local hospital. She later said that the battery failure was a reminder that no system was perfect. She ordered a backup battery for every radio in the building. The cost was $300. She paid for it out of her own pocket. The Colonial Heights tornado also led to changes in how the National Weather Service trained its meteorologists. Before 1993, the training for severe weather identification was largely theoretical. Meteorologists learned to recognize hook echoes and wall clouds from photographs and slides. After the tornado, the National Weather Service introduced a new training program called the Advanced Weather Interactive Processing System, or AWIPS. The system allowed meteorologists to access real-time radar data alongside satellite imagery and surface observations. The training program was first implemented at the Wakefield office in 1995. It became the standard for all National Weather Service offices by 1997. The impact of these changes was felt across the country. In 1998, a tornado outbreak struck the southeastern United States. The largest tornado of that outbreak was an F4 that hit the town of Spencer, South Dakota. The National Weather Service issued a tornado warning 51 minutes before the storm arrived. The warning was based on the same radar signatures that had been identified manually in 1993. This time, the rotation was detected automatically. The residents of Spencer had time to reach shelter. Only 10 people died compared to the 4 in Colonial Heights. The difference was not the size of the storm. It was the time between detection and warning. But the Colonial Heights tornado also exposed a deeper issue. The warning was issued at 2:13 p.m. The tornado touched down at 2:21 p.m. The residents had 8 minutes to react. That was enough time for some, but not for others. The family in the mobile home park had no way to hear the warning. The convenience store had a weather radio, but the owner had not turned it on because the battery was dead. The owner later told investigators that he had bought the radio 2 years earlier and had never replaced the battery. He said that he had not thought it was important. After the tornado, he replaced the battery every 3 months. He also installed a siren on the roof of the store. The siren cost him $1,000. He said it was worth every penny. The siren was tested for the first time on the anniversary of the tornado. The test was held at 2:13 p.m., the exact time the warning had been issued. The siren could be heard for half a mile. The owner, a man named Richard Talbot, later said that he had ordered the siren from a catalog. He had installed it himself. He had wired it to a backup generator. He said that no one would ever be caught off guard again, but the siren was not enough. In 1996, a tornado warning was issued for the same area. The sirens sounded. The residents of the mobile home park, which had been rebuilt, went to their shelter. But the tornado did not touch down. It passed to the north. The siren had been premature. The residents were angry. Some said that the siren had caused unnecessary panic. Richard Talbot defended the decision. He said that it was better to be safe than sorry. The debate over false alarms and warning fatigue continued for years. The National Weather Service studied the issue in 1998. They found that in areas where weather radios were common, the average response time to a tornado warning was just under 4 minutes. In areas where sirens were used, the average response time was 2 minutes. But the false alarm rate for sirens was higher than for radios. The sirens were often activated based on reports from spotter networks. The spotter network in Colonial Heights was established in 1994. It consisted of 20 volunteers who were trained by the National Weather Service to recognize severe weather. The spotters were called to action whenever a severe thunderstorm watch was issued. They reported to a central dispatcher who relayed the information to the National Weather Service. The system worked well, but it relied on volunteers. In 1995, the number of volunteers in Central Virginia dropped to 12. The program almost folded. It was saved by a donation from the Colonial Heights Rotary Club. The donation provided $300 for training materials and gas money. The human cost of the tornado extended beyond the physical injuries. The psychological trauma was documented by a team of researchers from Virginia Commonwealth University. They interviewed 60 survivors in the months after the tornado. The study was published in the Journal of Traumatic Stress in 1996. The researchers found that 40% of the survivors met the diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. The symptoms included nightmares, flashbacks, and hypervigilance. One survivor, a man named John Patterson, had his house destroyed. He was in the basement when the tornado passed. He later said that he could not sleep for a year. Every time he heard thunder, he would wake up and check the radar. He bought a weather radio and placed it next to his bed. He set the alarm to go off whenever a severe thunderstorm warning was issued. He said that the radio gave him a sense of control. He also started attending a support group for tornado survivors. The group met once a month at the local library. The first meeting had 5 people. By 1997, the group had 40 members. The support group was led by a retired psychologist named Dr. Alice Holloway. Dr. Holloway had been a resident of Colonial Heights during the tornado. She had seen the damage firsthand. She later said that the group was not about therapy. It was about community. The survivors shared stories, swapped tips on finding contractors, and helped each other cope with insurance claims. Dr. Holloway wrote a manual for other communities that wanted to start similar groups. The manual was distributed by the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. It was titled Recovering Together, a Guide for Tornado Survivors. The manual included a chapter on dealing with the sound of wind. One survivor had described the sound as a freight train. Another said it was like a jet engine. The manual recommended wearing earplugs during thunderstorms. The long-term recovery of Colonial Heights itself was marked by resilience and change. The mobile home park that had been destroyed was turned into a memorial park. The park was dedicated on the one-year anniversary of the tornado. It featured a plaque with the names of the 4 victims. The plaque was surrounded by 4 oak trees. The trees were planted by the families of the victims. The park was maintained by the town government. In 2000, a group of volunteers added a bench and a small garden. The garden was planted with perennials that bloomed in the spring. The colors were chosen to match the school colors of Colonial Heights High School. The school had been used as a shelter on the day of the tornado. The students had been evacuated to the gymnasium. The gymnasium was later renovated and renamed the Tornado Memorial Gym. A sign near the entrance told the story of the tornado and the response. The question of whether the warning could have been issued earlier continued to be debated by meteorologists for decades. In 2008, a team of researchers from the National Severe Storms Laboratory reanalyzed the radar data from August 6, 1993. They used modern algorithms to detect the Hook echo. They found that the Hook echo was visible on the radar at 1:58 p.m., 17 minutes before the warning was issued. The researchers concluded that if the WSR Rate 8D had been in place, the warning could have been issued at 2 p.m. That would have given the residents of Colonial Heights a 21-minute warning. The team published their findings in the journal Weather and Forecasting in 2009. The paper was titled A Retrospective Analysis of the 1993 Colonial Heights Tornado. The lead author was a meteorologist named Dr. Stephen B.C. Smith. He was a graduate student at the time of the tornado. He had studied the event for his master's thesis. He later said that the paper was his way of answering the question that had haunted him for 15 years, but even 21 minutes might not have saved everyone. The geography of Colonial Heights made it a difficult place to warn. The town was built on a hill. The tornado approached from the southwest, climbing the hill quickly. The warning had to travel through the air, through the wires, and into the homes of the people. The people had to hear it, understand it, and act. One survivor, a man named Thomas Banks, was in his garage when the tornado struck. He had heard the warning on his weather radio. He had 9 minutes to act. He decided to drive to his children's school. He made it to the parking lot just as the tornado hit. His car was flipped over. He survived with minor injuries. His children were safe in the school's shelter. He later said that he should have stayed home. He said that the warning was clear, but his instinct was to move. The instinct almost killed him. The story of the Colonial Heights tornado is not a story of a single failure. It is a collection of small failures, small delays, and small decisions that added up to tragedy. The radar was old. The warning was slow, the battery was dead, the siren was absent, the instinct to move was wrong. The storm itself was not exceptional. It was a medium-sized tornado on a summer afternoon, but it happened in a place that was not ready. The readiness came later. It came through laws and radios and drills and support groups. It came through 1,000 small changes made by people who did not want to live through the same thing again. The storm passed. The people rebuilt. The sky remained the same. The thunder still rolled. The question of whether we will be ready is not a single question. It is 1,000 questions asked every day in every town that lies beneath the clouds.